Before you scroll, before you blink, before you even breathe again, I need you to lock in with me right now, because what Blueface just did on that live is bigger than anything the internet has been screaming about all week. And I promise you, I absolutely promise you, the people covering this story are lying to your face about half of it. They are running with the clip. They are pasting the headline. They are posting the thumbnail. But they are not reading the clip. Nobody is reading the clip. Everybody is reacting, and nobody is actually listening to the words that came out of that man's mouth, one sentence at a time, slow enough to hear what he was actually confessing to. Blueface just accidentally handed the whole world a confession dressed up like a philosophy lesson. He did not intend to do it. He did not plan it. He did not write it down beforehand. It came out of him the way the truth always comes out of people who talk too much, sideways, unguarded, in the middle of a long monologue where he thought he was being profound, and he did not even realize he was indicting himself in front of thousands of witnesses. That is the part that should scare you. Not that he said it. He has said a version of this before. The scary part is that he said it with a straight face, calmly, the way a man recites a rule he has already memorized, and he did not hear a single word of what he was actually saying. Everybody is running with the clip. Nobody is reading the clip. And that is exactly why we are here tonight. That is why I am opening this file all the way up. Because I refuse to let Blueface walk away from those words like he didn't say what he said. I refuse to let the algorithm bury the most important sentence in an ocean of memes. I refuse to let the comment section drown out the one exchange that actually matters. The one moment where Blueface described his entire operating system out loud, and then smiled like he had just solved a riddle that nobody else in the room was smart enough to solve. Welcome back to the family. Welcome back to the people who actually pay attention. Welcome back to every single one of you who hit that subscribe button and stayed with me through every twist of this Blueface saga. Because tonight we are not guessing. Tonight we are not translating. Tonight we are not doing the thing where somebody posts a clip and 20,000 people project their own version of events onto it, and we all argue about the projection instead of the clip. Tonight we are putting Blueface on the record with his own mouth, with his own words, at his own pace, on his own broadcast, and then we are walking through the receipts one by one until there is nothing left to argue about. Until the fog lifts. Until the fog lifts and every single one of you can see the pattern for yourself, plain as day, written across the entire timeline in black and white. So here is where Blueface tripped over his own tongue. Here is the sentence that is going to echo for the next 6 months, whether Blueface likes it or not. Blueface got on that live and calmly explained, out loud, on camera, in front of thousands of witnesses, that if a woman in his life does something he does not approve of, he simply moves on. That is the verb he used. Moves on. Like a man switching phone carriers because the coverage is bad. Like a man returning a jacket because the zipper sticks. He finds a replacement. He builds a new household. He produces a new child. He plays the role of a provider until the next disagreement. And then he repeats the entire cycle from the top, word for word, step for step, the same way you replay a song you have heard 1,000 times because you do not know any other songs. That is not me paraphrasing. That is not me editorializing. That is Blueface describing Blueface. That is a man standing in front of a camera and reading his own user manual out loud like a passage from a self-help book he wrote in his own head, and then closing the book and waiting for the applause. The scary part is not that the words are bad. The scary part is that he is proud of them. The scary part is that he believes this is wisdom. The scary part is that he has turned a pattern of abandonment into a philosophy, given it a name in his own mind, and now he teaches it to whoever will sit on the couch next to him long enough to hear it. Now let me tell you why that matters. Because Nevaeh is sitting right there next to Blueface while Blueface is basically reading her the future. She is smiling. She is nodding. She is glowing like she just won a prize on a game show. She is looking at the camera the way someone looks at the camera when they think they have finally made it. When they think they have finally secured the bag. When they think they have finally replaced somebody and claimed a spot that 1,000 other women would fight her for. And I am watching that broadcast thinking, sweetheart, did you hear the same broadcast the rest of us just heard? Or did the audio cut out on your side of the couch? Because the rest of us heard a man describe, in plain English, the exact mechanism that is going to be used on you the moment you step out of line in his eyes. The rest of us heard a man explain that you are not a partner, you are a position, and the position gets refilled the same way every time, by the same manager, with the same job listing. I am not being cruel. I am not being a hater. I am reading the clip. The clip says that the man on that couch has a system, and the system has no exceptions. And everybody who has ever sat on that couch eventually stopped sitting on that couch. And the man did not cry about it. The man did not grieve about it. The man went and got another couch. Blueface just told you, in plain English, that the second you slip up in his eyes, not the second you actually do something wrong, But the second he decides that you have done something wrong in his eyes, wherever he has drawn that invisible line today, you're going to be standing in the exact same shoes Chrisean is standing in right now, holding a baby, watching the door close, wondering where the man went, wondering what you did, wondering if there was a version of this that could have ended differently, and the answer will be no. There was no version. There was a template, and you just watched him hold it up to the camera and read it aloud. And before the comment section catches fire, let me get ahead of it, because I already know exactly what somebody is going to type. Somebody is going to type that we do not know if Chrisean Jr. is Blueface's son. Somebody is going to type that we do not know if this new baby is Blueface's baby. Somebody is going to type that we do not know anything, and that I should sit down, and that I am doing too much, and that this is nobody's business. And you are right. Partially. We do not know. That is the whole point. Nobody knows. And the reason nobody knows is the part that the defenders never want to sit with. Because the reason nobody knows is that the people on the couch keep choosing to perform paternity instead of proving it. Because Nevaeh, according to the timeline the internet itself put together, was allegedly in rotation with more than one man in the same window. 3 names came forward. 4 names came forward, depending on which corner of the timeline you trust, depending on which screenshot you believe, depending on which day the receipts start and stop. And I am going to say something that is going to make people uncomfortable, because it is the truth, and the truth does not care about comfort. Blueface is out here claiming a baby whose features do not automatically scream Blueface. And I have watched enough courtroom paternity television in my life to know that faces lie, noses lie, eyes lie, skin tones lie, and the only thing that tells the truth is a lab result signed by a real technician in a real building with a real chain of custody that a real professional can stand behind in a real courtroom. I have sat through hours of those paternity shows. You have sat through hours of those paternity shows. Do not act like you haven't. We have all watched a woman stand under those lights and put her hand on a Bible and swear on everything she loves that she is 100% certain, absolutely positive, that there is no possibility of anyone else, and that she would bet her own life on it. And then the envelope opens, and the host reads the number, and suddenly there is a possibility of everyone else, and the camera zooms in on her face while it crumbles. And we sit there on our couches eating popcorn and saying we felt it coming the whole time. We felt it coming. And then when it happens to a celebrity we like, we suddenly forget that we ever saw that show, and we demand that everybody else forget it too. That is not a knock on Nevaeh personally. I have not met Nevaeh. I am not standing in her house. I do not know what happened and who was there, and I am not pretending to know. What I am doing is pointing out that this is a pattern human beings have been running for as long as television cameras have existed. And it is a pattern that does not skip people just because they are pretty, just because they cry convincingly, just because they seem nice in a live stream. The pattern does not care about your energy. The pattern only cares about the test. And Blueface, of all people, should know better than to skip a step in that pattern. Because Blueface has spent the last however many months building an entire public identity on top of the idea that you should never skip that step, that a real man verifies, that a smart man protects himself, that only fools and suckers believe a woman's word without paperwork. So let me ask Blueface directly, because Blueface loves to talk, and I want him to answer this in a live, and I want him to answer it without a hype man next to him translating it into a slogan. Blueface, if you were confident enough to publicly separate from Chrisean because you convinced yourself she had been unfaithful, and if you were confident enough to distance yourself from Chrisean Jr. because of the same accusation, then how in the world does Blueface turn around and grab a microphone and announce to the entire planet that this new baby is 100% his, when the woman standing next to him has been publicly linked to multiple men in the exact same window? Explain the difference. Explain what changed. Explain why the accusation that was enough to walk away from one woman and one child is suddenly not even worth a pause with the next woman and the next child. Because I can think of only 2 answers, and neither one flatters you. Either the accusation was never actually the reason, and the reason was always something easier and uglier that you are not willing to say out loud. Or the accusation was always real to you, but you are willing to suspend it whenever it is convenient, whenever the new situation feels good, whenever the new woman makes you feel like you won, which means the accusation was not a principle at all. It was a mood. Blueface, you cannot have it both ways. You do not get to be the strictest judge in the world for one woman and the softest jury in the world for the next one. You do not get to run an interrogation room when it is Chrisean and a beach party when it is Nevaeh. That is not logic. That is not consistency. That is convenience. That is applying the standard only when it fits the narrative you are trying to sell this week. And that is where Blueface's whole live show falls apart. Because Blueface loves to walk around the internet acting like he is a walking encyclopedia of relationship advice. Blueface loves to lecture. Blueface loves to explain. Blueface loves to pause dramatically and then drop a line like he just invented gravity. He loves to say things like, I am the smartest person in the room. I figured it out. Y'all are late. Y'all are slow. Y'all do not understand the game. Y'all are still on level 1, and I am on level whatever number sounds impressive that day. Sir, respectfully, you sound like a man who has never once in his life sat quietly with his own thoughts. You sound like a man who has never once looked in a mirror and asked the mirror a hard question and then actually waited for the answer instead of talking over it. You sound like a man who confuses volume for wisdom. And I need you to hear that, Blueface, because it is the single most important sentence in this entire breakdown. Talking louder is not the same as being right. Repeating yourself is not the same as being convincing. Having followers is not the same as having a point. And the proof that this is true is sitting right in front of you, in your own timeline, in your own broadcast, in the fact that you can describe your own behavior out loud, step by step, and still not recognize it as the problem. A wise man listens to his own words like they came out of somebody else's mouth. A wise man catches himself mid-sentence and winces. A wise man hears himself describing a cycle of abandonment and thinks, wait, that is not a flex, that is an admission. You heard it and kept going. That is not wisdom. That is autopilot. Because here is the truth Blueface refuses to hear, and it is the truth that is going to keep following him no matter how many moves he makes, no matter how many women he swaps, no matter how many zip codes he changes. You can trade the woman. You can trade the house. You can trade the last name on the birth certificate. You can trade the city, the studio, the label, the entire address book. You can pack up your whole life and start again in a new place with a new audience and a new argument and a new set of people who do not know the entire history yet. But every single time you start a new chapter, Blueface, you are still the one holding the pen. And the pen keeps writing the same story. The names change. The faces change. The location changes. The plot does not change. The ending does not change. And that is not a coincidence. And that is not bad luck. And that is not the women. And that is not the industry. And that is not the fans. And that is not the hatters. That is math. And math does not care about your feelings. Math does not care how much money you make. Math does not care how many streams you got. Math does not care about your mood, your aura, your vibe, your energy, your zodiac sign, or anything else you use to avoid looking at the numbers. If the common denominator in every failed equation is the same number, you do not need a therapist to tell you to look at that number. You need a mirror. And you need to be honest about what you see. Let me tell you something my grandmother used to say, and I want you to sit with it, because it is the oldest wisdom in the world and half of you have never actually applied it to a famous man's life before. If you keep meeting the same problem in every room you walk into, at some point you have to consider the possibility that the problem walked in with you. Not the possibility that every room is cursed. Not the possibility that the world is out to get you. Not the possibility that you are just unlucky. The possibility that the problem walked in with you. That the problem is not the room. The problem is you. Blueface, the problem walked in with you. Blueface, the problem is sitting on your side of the couch. Blueface, the problem is holding the microphone. Blueface, the problem is the man in the reflection who keeps narrating his own life without ever once listening to the narration. And no amount of new beginnings will ever erase the one thing every single one of those beginnings has in common, which is you. You are the constant. You are the common denominator. You are the template. Now let us get into the part of the story that the algorithm does not want you to think too hard about, because this is where the timeline stops making sense entirely. And this is the part that actually requires you to use your brain instead of just your outrage. Blueface and Nevaeh went on that live and told the audience that a paternity test had already been signed off, that everything was handled, that Nevaeh had been cooperative, that the process was clean, that there was nothing left to discuss, that the doubters could go find something else to do with their time. Wax said it out loud. Blueface repeated it. The words were clear. The message was clear. The chapter was supposedly closed. The internet was told to move along. Nothing to see here. The science is done. Then the very next scene, the very next broadcast, possibly the same day, possibly the next day, we see Blueface and Nevaeh at home swabbing each other's cheeks with a drugstore kid on camera, like a science fair project. Like two kids doing a volcano experiment in the kitchen. Like a couple doing one of those test your compatibility games you buy at the checkout line. Swab the cheek. Seal the tube. Mail it in. And they are filming it, broadcasting it, presenting it to the world as if this is the definitive proof that was allegedly already done and signed off. Explain that to me. Somebody please walk me through the sequence, because I am not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I can count, and I can count to 2. And there are 2 tests in this story, and 2 tests is one too many tests. If the test was already completed, why is there a second test? If the first test was real, what is the purpose of the second one? If the second test is the real test, Then what exactly was Wack talking about the first time when he said it was signed off? Was he talking about a test that does not exist yet? Was he talking about a test that was about to be taken but presented as a test that was already finished? Was he talking about a feeling, a vibe, an assumption dressed up in the language of a lab report? Somebody is lying. And I do not need a lab coat to figure out which somebody it is. I just need the timeline, and the timeline is screaming. And while we are asking questions, let me drop one more into the pot, because this is the detail that turned the whole thing over for me, and I want to give credit where credit is due. I did a little digging, because that is what we do around here. We do not just react, we research. We do not just repost, we verify. And here is what the research turned up. California hospitals do not perform paternity DNA tests on newborns. That is not a rumor. That is not a hot take. That is not something I read in somebody's comment section and decided to clip. That is the actual policy. That is the actual standard. Hospitals do not run paternity tests as part of newborn care, full stop. There is a legal and procedural reason for that. And there is a chain of custody reason for that. And the reason it matters is that it makes the claim of a signed-off hospital test structurally impossible on its face. So when Wack got on his platform and told the world that a hospital paternity test had been completed and signed off, one of three things is true, and all three of them are bad for the credibility of the people narrating this story to the public. Either Wack was misinformed, and somebody fed him a line without checking the most basic facts, or Wack was making it up in real time, which is worse, because that is not a mistake, that is a fabrication. Or Wack was repeating something somebody told him without checking a single fact, which is just the first option with extra steps and less accountability. Any of those three options is a problem, because Wack is supposed to be the credible voice in this circus. Wack is supposed to be the one who does not just run with the clip. Wack is supposed to be the anchor, the translator, the adult in the room. If Wack cannot get the basic geography of a paternity test correct, if Wack cannot tell the difference between a place that runs paternity tests and a place that does not, then Wack cannot be the one narrating this story to the public. And that is not hate. That is just the standard that comes with the role he put himself in. And while we are on the subject, I want to shout out a viewer in the community who caught that detail before I did, because I would have kept it moving if the family did not put me on. The group chat caught it first. The comments caught it first. The people watching at home caught it before the people with platforms, and that is why we do this together. That is why the group chat is undefeated. That is why I keep telling y'all, we are not Team Blueface. We are not Team Nevaeh. We are not Team Chrisean. We are not Team Wack. We are not Team anybody who asks us to turn our brains off at the door. We are Team Read the Room. We are Team Follow the Paperwork. We are Team Ask the question everyone else is scared to ask. We are Team Pull up the actual policy and read it slow. Because that is what sharp people do, and this audience is the sharpest on the platform. And I say that every single week, because it is true every single week. And here is another question everyone else is scared to ask. And it is the question that is going to bother you the most once you actually think about it. Why is the baby already named after Blueface? Why is the birth certificate already carrying his identity? Why is the most permanent legal document a human being gets, the one that follows a child for the rest of their life, the one you have to petition a court to change? Why is it already stamped with this man's name when the paternity conversation is allegedly still live? Because if the paternity conversation is still open, if the second test is still being processed, if there is any daylight at all between accusation and confirmation, then the naming ceremony is premature. It is not just premature, it is rushed in a way that only makes sense if somebody has a reason to rush it. You do not stamp a permanent legal identity on a child in the middle of an open question. You do not make the biggest legal commitment you will ever make while the lab is still chewing on a cotton swab. That is not love. That is strategy. And I am not saying whose strategy it is, and I am not saying it is malicious, and I am not saying I know what the end game is. I am just saying somebody in that household is playing a longer game than they are telling us about. Somebody in that household understands something about the legal system that the average person does not, and that understanding is being used, and it is being used fast, before the second test has a chance to complicate the story. And I need y'all to see that for what it is, because the people who move first in a legal situation are almost always the people who understand the board the best. Because if Blueface signs that birth certificate, Blueface is legally on the hook. And I need you to hear every word of what I am about to say, because this is not gossip, this is not opinion, this is the law. Blueface, do you understand what you just did? Do you understand that the second that ink dries, you are financially responsible for that child until adulthood, regardless of what any future test says? Regardless of what the second test says? Regardless of what a real test in a real facility with real chain of custody says 2 years from now, when everything has fallen apart? Do you understand that the law protects the child first, and the child was born into a household And whoever signed the papers for that household has assumed a legal responsibility that does not dissolve when the relationship dissolves. Blueface, do you understand that if you and Nevaeh split tomorrow, and Blueface, you will split, because Blueface splits with everyone eventually? And I am not saying that as a psychic. I am saying it as a student of your own broadcast. You told us this yourself on the live. That Blueface will be paying child support? And do you understand that child support is not optional? Do you understand that child support is not a diss track beef where you can clap back and make it go away? Do you understand that if Blueface does not pay, Blueface will be sitting in a cell? Not trending, not ratioed, not canceled, in a cell. Because the courts do not care about your follower count, and the courts do not watch your lives, and the courts do not speak the language of clout. The courts speak the language of orders and enforcement, and Blueface just gambled his freedom on a hunch. Blueface just bet the rest of his life on the word of a woman he has known for a fraction of the time he has known Chrisean. Read that sentence again and let it land. The woman he built a whole public war around. The woman he demanded receipts from. The woman he treated like she needed to prove her own child's existence to a jury of strangers. That woman was subjected to a standard of proof. And this woman, the new one, the one on the couch smiling through the confession, is being given the benefit of the doubt before the doubt has even been formally raised, before the test has even come back, before the second swab has even dried. Make that make sense to me, because I cannot. Now let us walk into the room nobody in Blueface camp wants to walk into. And I want to choose my words carefully here, because this is the part where the internet loves to get sloppy and reckless and say things that are not true. The government assistance conversation. And I want to be clear about what I am saying and what I am not saying. I am not in Nevaeh's household. I am not looking at Nevaeh's tax returns. I am not sitting in the caseworker's office. I am not a fraud investigator, and I am not pretending to be one. I am only going off of what Nevaeh and Blueface have voluntarily posted online for the entire world to see. I am not hacking anybody's phone. I am not digging through anybody's private records. I am reading what they chose to put on a public platform, because that is the whole job, and the whole job is to read the public platform. And what they have posted online is a lifestyle. A lifestyle with new cars, new outfits, new jewelry, new furniture, new deliveries, new packages arriving on camera every other day. A lifestyle that Blueface himself brags brings in tens of thousands of dollars a week. He brags about it. He says it out loud. He uses it as a flex in arguments. The homes, the diamonds, the cars, the money. It is the entire brand. It is the entire identity. It is the entire reason half the people watching are watching. The money is not a secret in this story. The money is the headline of the story. Now, if you have ever in your life applied for food assistance or medical assistance, you already know where I am going with this, and you already felt your stomach tighten the second I brought it up. There are income brackets. There are hard cutoffs. There are eligibility windows that are so tight that being $50 over the line can bounce you off the entire program. $50. Not 50,000. 50. The system does not do nuance. The system does not do vibes. The system does a math problem with your income at the center of it. And if the number is too big, the answer is no. And the answer is no for reasons that are written down in documents you signed when you applied. So how does a household that publicly brags about tens of thousands of dollars a week in income also publicly display a benefits card on camera? That is the question. That is not an accusation. That is a question, and it is a question the state is going to be very interested in answering, because the state does not watch these lives for entertainment. The state watches these lives because the lives are public, and the public record now contains video evidence of two contradictory things being true at the same time, and the state is built to resolve exactly that kind of contradiction. Nevaeh, sweetheart, I am not accusing you of anything, but I am telling you that the internet is going to accuse you of everything, and once that clip is in the wild, the state agencies do not have a choice but to look. That is not gossip. That is procedure. That is the machine doing what the machine is legally required to do. And Blueface, if Blueface is standing right next to Nevaeh while that card is on camera, if Blueface is co-signing that lifestyle on the same feed where the card appears, then Blueface is standing next to a legal exposure that Blueface celebrity does not shield him from. This is not a rap beef. This is not a diss track. This is not a Twitter argument about who fell off. This is federal and state benefit policy. And the people who work in those offices do not care how many followers Blueface has, and they do not care how many spins his team puts on it, and they do not care that he is just trying to provide. They care about what the paperwork says, and the paperwork says what the paperwork says, and no amount of Instagram captions is going to change the paperwork. When you live your life on camera, you are not just broadcasting to your fans. You are broadcasting to anyone who knows how to file a report, and I promise you, those people are watching, and they are taking notes, and they are not impressed by the diamonds. So let us take a step back and look at the whole board, because I want you to see what I am seeing, not as fans and not as haters, but as people reading a timeline with their own eyes. Blueface has spent months explaining to the world that Chrisean is a liar. Blueface has spent months explaining that Chrisean Jr. may not be his. Blueface has spent months building an entire public identity around the idea that a man should protect himself from women who cheat and children who cannot be verified. He has made it his thing. He has made it the theme of every interview, the punchline of every live, the foundation of every defense. Protect yourself. Verify everything. Trust nobody. Get the test. Never let a woman play you. That was the entire sermon, week after week, month after month, until it was more than a sermon, until it was a brand. And then, in the same breath, in the same season, in the same news cycle, Blueface is walking into a new relationship with a woman whose paternity timeline is publicly murkier than the one Blueface just walked out of. Murkier. Not cleaner. Not clearer. Murkier. More names. More questions. More unverified claims floating around. And instead of applying the standard he spent a year screaming about, he is suspending the standard, waving it away, acting like the standard was never the point. That is not evolution. That is not growth. That is not, he finally found a real one. That is a man who learned nothing. That is a man who took an entire public education on trust and verification and then walked directly into the exact situation he claimed to have escaped. And he did it on camera. And he did it with a smile. And he did it while the person he abandoned was still holding the receipts he used to use against her. And Nevaeh, I need to speak to you directly now, because I want you to hear this from someone who is not on your payroll and not in your comments and not benefiting from your downfall. I want you to hear it from someone who has no stake in whether you stay or go, because that is the only kind of voice you should actually trust right now. Nevaeh, the man sitting next to you just told the audience, on his own broadcast, that this is what he does. He starts over. He walks away. He resets. He rebuilds. He recycles. He said it out loud. He was not whispering. He was not being ambushed. He was not caught in a candid moment with a hidden camera. He was volunteering that information like it was a badge of honor, like it was a resume highlight, like he expected the room to nod along and say, yes, that is a healthy, evolved man right there. And you were smiling through it. Nevaeh, I need you to rewind that clip when you are alone tonight, when the cameras are off, when the lights are down, when the comments have stopped flooding in and the only sound in the room is your own breathing. Rewind it. Watch his face. Watch him describe the mechanism. And then I need you to ask yourself one question, and I need you to be honest about the answer, because the future version of you is depending on how honest you are right now. If Blueface walked away from Chrisean, if Blueface walked away from Jaden, if Blueface walked away from every woman before you, and the timeline says he did, and the timeline does not lie about who has come and gone across that couch, what magical property do you possess that Blueface will not eventually walk away from you? What is it? What is the thing you have that the others did not? What is the variable you change that changes the outcome? Because I have been looking, and I do not see one, and neither does anybody else watching with their eyes open. Because I promise you, Nevaeh, the answer is not the baby. I need you to understand that with your whole chest, because every woman in this pattern thought the answer might be the baby, and they were all wrong, and the pattern does not make exceptions for babies. The baby did not save the last woman. The baby did not save the one before her, and the baby will not save this one. Change that belief now, before it costs you more than it already has. The baby is not a shield. The baby is not an anchor that holds a drifting man in place. The baby is another human being, and a man who treats women as replaceable positions will eventually treat the household around the baby as replaceable too. And the second Blueface decides you have crossed his invisible line, and you will not know where the line is, because he moves it, because the line is wherever his mood is that day. Blueface is going to hand you the same script he handed everyone else. Only this time, the world already knows the ending, because Blueface already told us how the movie ends. Blueface wrote the spoiler on his own broadcast, in his own words, with his own mouth, and you sat there and applauded the spoiler. Now let me get to the part that is going to make some of y'all mad, and I do not care, because this is the part that has to be said, and the woman sitting in my comments right now typing stay out of their business is exactly the person who needs to hear it the most. The people in the comments who are furiously defending Blueface right now, the people who are calling this a growth arc, the people who are saying that Blueface has changed, the people who are treating Nevaeh like some kind of redemption prize, y'all are the same people who were dragging Chrisean 6 months ago. You are the same accounts, same energy, same fingers. Y'all are the same people who were calling Chrisean crazy, calling Chrisean unstable, calling Chrisean a bad mother, calling Chrisean a liar, calling Chrisean every name the algorithm would let you get away with. And now that Blueface has swapped one woman for another, y'all suddenly have amnesia. Y'all suddenly cannot remember your own timeline. Y'all suddenly think Blueface is a philosopher. He is not a philosopher. He is a rerun. And I am not going to sit here and watch the same rerun for another season and pretend I am seeing something new. And I am not going to let y'all pretend it either. When the next chapter closes, and it will close, because they all close, I do not want to see a single one of you acting like you did not have the information. I am handing you the information right now. The man told you who he is on Alive, and you are choosing to hear a love story instead of a warning. That is a choice. And when it does not work out, you do not get to be surprised, because the surprise was never the truth. The surprise was always just you refusing to read. If Blueface wants to be treated like a serious adult, Blueface needs to start behaving like one. And behaving like one looks like this, and it is very simple, and it is very public, and it is very doable. Take the real test. Take it at a real facility. Take it with real chain of custody. Put the results in a sealed envelope. Have a real professional read them out loud. And then, and only then, do we start the conversation about names and birth certificates and futures. Not before. Naming comes after proof. Futures come after proof. The birth certificate comes after the lab report, not the other way around. That is the order. That is the sequence. That is what a man who actually believes his own sermon would do. And the fact that Blueface is not doing it is the entire story. And it is a story that requires no editorializing, because it tells itself. Until Blueface does that, everything Blueface says on that live is background noise. Everything Blueface posts on his page is background noise. Everything Blueface argues about in the comments is background noise. The captions are noise. The voice memos are noise. The y'all don't know the whole story posts are noise.